Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation, the great debate, but it can only be either of those if you joined in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls. 44208-601-4555. That's the number to call. You call us, we'll call you back. Establish a clear line. And remember, if you get on the TV with me, the volume on your TV has to be down at 0, or I'll have to move swiftly on because no one will understand either of us. You can also SMS the show on 447800008066, or you can email me at comment@presstv.co.uk. You can even tweet the show, comment_presstv. Well, every one of us woke up this morning and has no doubt been fixated by the media coverage the whole of the day, and it will go on throughout the night and into tomorrow, that's for sure, of the consequences of the mass slaughter carried out by at least 2 attackers on a magazine in Paris. 12 people, at least, were murdered in the attack. 12 people who included 2 Muslims. They were primarily journalists and other workers in a satirical magazine called Charlie Hebdo, based in Paris, about which more later. They were killed in cold blood. They had no arms to defend themselves. They were trapped in their workplace and they were massacred. It is murder, no less than mass murder, and no one can justify it, and anyone who seeks to justify it is, I believe, defaming the religion of Islam, defaming the 2 billion adherents of Islam. I believe that the idea that the Almighty God, the Lord of all the worlds, the creator of the universe, the universes, that God needs some kind of vengeance wreaked on unarmed, innocent people in a newspaper office is, well, not just disgusting as an idea, but patently ridiculous. And the self-appointed avengers who carried out this mass murder will face justice now, one hopes, and on the Judgment Day. Their attack has made the situation of French Muslims and even Muslims in Britain, already beleaguered, much, much worse. I can add another to the death toll. An unborn child of a pregnant Muslim woman has just lost her baby after being attacked in Paris, no doubt as a direct consequence of the hideous attack that took place in Paris yesterday. The truth is that murder begets murder. Violence begets violence. Fanaticism and extremism begets fanaticism and extremism. It's said, and I've said it, that Charlie Hebdo, the French satirical magazine, is guilty of terrible provocations. Not just against Muslims, by the way. One of their caricaturists is currently on trial for anti-Semitism, following a cartoon of the former President Nicolas Sarkozy that he drew. I have seen cartoons from the magazine mocking, making fun of the Holocaust, which is a pretty sacred cow for me and for many, many others. I disapprove strongly with these provocations, but no provocation justifies murder. No one should shed their blood, lose their life because of anything that they wrote, anything that they said, anything that they drew. I'm making these points very clear because the rest of what I have to say will no doubt be deliberately distorted and traduced by the usual suspects. But I just wanted you to be clear about where I stand. And that's where I stand. The people who carried out this attack were terrorist murderers, and only a hypocrite condemns some terrorist murders whilst not condemning others, and in some cases actually facilitating others. Amongst those facilitating other terror attacks on other people are the present and the past government of France, as well as the present as well as the past government of Britain. You see, you can't pick and choose which pool of blood makes you angry and sick and which pool of blood you're prepared to pay for. The government of France has been facilitating, paying, arming, training, and providing diplomatic and political cover for exactly the same kind of terrorist attacks, but mounted in Syria. Exactly the same kind, but far more deadly, and slaughtering far more people. And not just yesterday, but every day, for the last 4 years. The former colonial power, France, is up to its neck in the blood that has been shed in Syria. Now, that's not the fault of the innocents who were murdered in the newspaper office. It's not the fault of the police officers who were cold-bloodedly murdered in the course of their duty. But it remains a fact. And it's a fact of particular moment because the people that France and Britain and the United States and Israel and others in the Persian Gulf, the people that they have been facilitating, the terrorists they've been backing in Syria, are exactly the same kind of people who carried out the terrorist attack in Paris yesterday. These Takfiri, fanatic, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever you want to call them, the people who carried out the murders in Paris yesterday are exactly the kind of people with exactly the same kind of mindset and pledge allegiance to exactly the same terrorist organizations. Yet France and others have strengthened those in Syria and continue to do so, whilst suffering, their citizens at least are suffering the consequences of exactly that kind of terrorism at home. And you'll have to forgive me if I say I told you so. I did warn the British government, the French government, the American government, all governments, I warned them over and over again that the Frankenstein monster that you're building up in Syria will one day be out of control and will hurt you and your citizens and your society. And that's exactly what has happened in Paris yesterday, and it's exactly what has happened elsewhere and what will happen, I have no doubt, in the future. I heard a French journalist on the radio today say, when talking about the brutal professionalism of these murderers yesterday, that for them, she said, it's a war zone. But we, she said, the French are not at war. But that, unfortunately, is simply untrue. France is at war. It's at war overseas, where it's sending its soldiers, and in the case of Syria and Iraq, its aircraft, and sending its special forces, sending its money, its weapons, its political and diplomatic support into war in other people's countries. Well, the reality in the 21st century is that you don't get to pick and choose where the war is. You don't get to restrict the war to other people's countries. Those with whom you are at war, those with whom you are in league in wars, like in Syria, are perfectly capable in this modern globalized world of hurting you here, there, and everywhere. And the problem is, it's almost always entirely innocent people who are murdered. And that's what happened in Paris yesterday. But here's my question. Which of this week's terror attacks will you remember? The proper answer is all of them. But the actual answer is that you'll remember only the terror attacks in Paris. You won't remember even if you ever knew that this very week Israel and the United States killed and maimed civilian people in terror drone attacks. You will not remember that Al-Shabaab in Somalia executed, murdered in cold blood people in that country. You will not remember that ISIS carried out several terrorist attacks in Iraq and in Syria. You will not remember that many terrorist organizations continued to carry out terror attacks in Syria. You will not remember them because the media will make sure that you fixate, and for a purpose, only on one of this week's terrorist attacks. And their purpose is to keep alive a double standard which lies at the heart of all of this trouble in the world. And it's this, that for the media and the political class in the powerful countries, the blood of some people is worth more than the blood of others. And moreover, they are ready to support the spilling of other people's blood in other countries, hoping, believing, maybe correctly, that the blood being shed in other people's countries will not be much noticed by the public and the voters in the country which is in part responsible. Whereas everyone will have many, many, many days to remember and to dread the consequences of the mass murder in Paris. Already mosques in France have been attacked, some of them with rifles, some of them with grenades. Other bomb plots against French mosques are no doubt being uncovered as I speak. Muslims in many Western countries, including our own, already know that in the wake of this kind of thing, from 9/11 until now, Muslims are in peril. In Birmingham, in England, the city to which I'm about to go, in Birmingham, we have an example of a man on his way back from the mosque, an old man who was beheaded by an anti-Muslim fascist terrorist. He was beheaded just a few weeks, if I recall correctly, before the brutal, cruel murder of Lee Rigby. Not anyone that's watching this will know the name of Muhammad Salim. That old man will know him as well as they know the name of Lee Rigby. But maybe my caller, Muhammad, in Birmingham, does. Muhammad, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Josh. And I'm really impressed by your last words related to a killing of an old man in the morning. I would like to comment that which of 6 terrorist attacks I remember. I remember, number 1, the drone attacks by Americans into Afghanistan. And number 2, by an attack by Israeli force who are illegal settlers in Palestine. I would like to draw the attention of public of a letter written by a 14-year-old child from Palestine to President Barack Obama, in which he mentioned, like in the nights when they're about to sleep or when they are in mid of sleep, the dogs come into their house with Israeli forces, and nobody is there to help them out. Secondly, they are Muslims. When the dogs went past their house or touches the clothes, they can't wear that clothes and reach Salah. Is there anyone to help them out? Secondly, about the Paris attack, I would like to draw an attention that a person who the government says is a Muslim, he just shot a kebab house. The people in the kebab house. And in return, what they did, they broke down all the mosques nearby. And this is what Muslims, to me, believe, that this was not an attack by a Muslim, but this was a pre-planned attack to destroy the mosque nearby.
This was what?
I would like,
what? Sorry, what did you just say, Mohammed?
Attack.
Mohammed, what did you just say? This was not an attack by Muslims. What?
This was basically a pre-planned attack which was done to destroy the mosque nearby.
Are you talking about the attack on the magazine or the attack on the kebab shop?
Kebab shop. I'm talking about the attack on kebab shop.
Yes, I have no doubt. There are people lying in wait in France as well as England and elsewhere to attack Muslims and to attack mosques. I have no doubt about that. But there's no doubt also that the atmosphere which has been produced by the terrorist attack yesterday on the magazine has made the task of these Muslim haters much easier.
That's good. George, I have a question from everyone.
Yeah.
So whenever there is an attack, why is just that a person known as Muslim, for example, there was an attack which a person killed a person with machete, and it was said that the person was not having a Muslim name, but they said this is a converted Muslim. The person just reverted to Islam, and he didn't change his name. Means this is just a policy to defame Muslims in this country, and this had nothing to do with the terrorism in Islam, because Islam never taught.
Well, anybody who carries out the kind of atrocity as was carried out yesterday, in my opinion, cannot be a Muslim, because Islam explicitly precludes, forbids, declares sinful any such act of taking the lives of innocent people. I don't believe that anyone can be a Christian and carry out a terrorist attack, like Breivik in Norway, for example, who murdered scores of people, and his stated reason for doing so was a hatred of Islam and a belief that Islam was displacing Christianity in European society. He cannot be called a Christian. Neither can Bush and Blair, who wore their religion on their sleeves, truly be called Christians, because they broke every commandment and every lesson that Jesus taught. Mohammed, thanks for that opening call. Oh dear, Zachary in Aberdeen. Go ahead, Zachary.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. George Galloway. Regarding whatever it is required to people know, you have said everything, and so I cannot add anything to that. But I would like to say that this is all indication that the world leadership and management has failed. On this basis, we must define the terrorists, those that are ordering these crimes against humanity. All the terrorism is condemned by every decent people, whether Muslim, Christian, and real Jewish people. So on this basis, the world management system, because of the moral bankruptcy of the leaders like Obama, like Cameron, like Sarkozy, or the French Prime Minister, President, all of them, they are the actual terrorists, because they are instructing, and it's possible that this scenario is set up for political gain, and all these things using innocent people to do the crime, and then innocent people to get killed, to they achieve their goal, political goals. This is what is it. So world management system has failed because of the bankruptcy, political bankruptcy, because of the total bankruptcy of the world leaders, especially American and the French and the Germany and the British.
Okay, Zachary, thanks for that call. There's no doubt about the moral bankruptcy involved of the world system and the world's leaders, but I don't think the people who carried out the attack in Paris yesterday needed any orders or any direction from anyone else. It was within them. It is within such people in Syria every day, in Iraq every day. It's within them in Pakistan every day. It's within them. It's within a part of the body of the Muslims. A determination to murder anyone with whom they disagree. They don't need Sarkozy to tell them to do so. John's in France. Let's hear from him. John, welcome. John?
Hello?
Yeah, go on. You're on the air.
Am I on? Well, first of all, there isn't a free press because the people that had the offices before the people that had just been raided, they were shut down for maligning General de Gaulle, who actually I think is the only top politician I want to shake hands with. So I'm not saying that they were right to do it, but I'm saying that it's free speech to do it, and they would stop doing it. And as for other free speech, I cannot say in France or in Germany anything about a certain thing that happened unless I agree with it. Because if I don't agree with it, then I can get up to 5 years. So the nonsense about free speech is a nonsense. As far as the people doing what they did, I don't agree with anybody killing anybody at all. So I'm not your man as far as that's concerned. But the fact that they made fun of the leader of a church, as far as I'm concerned, it's just bad manners. And you don't do things like that. If you've got something to say about the church, and you've got evidence that that church is doing something wrong, then by all means put it in the newspaper. But not just to be nasty or not nasty, be trying to...
Well, I'm with you on that last point, that to publish what they call cartoons, they're hate posters for me, of the Prophet Muhammad in obscene situations with other prophets, to mercilessly lampoon religious leaders in the way that this magazine has done, and will now, by the way, have a much more vast circulation as a result of yesterday's attack, is wrong. It maybe should be illegal, maybe it should not. But the one thing that is unequivocal, needs to be said: no one should shed their blood or be murdered for anything that they wrote, drew, or said. This is unconscionable and is the road to ruin, is the road to hell on earth. If one is at risk of actual death because of an expression of opinion, however rotten that expression is, however rotten that opinion is, then civil society will cease to exist. It's wrong, immoral, criminal, and sinful. As to the other points that you made, I have to make this point, that this talk of freedom of speech is bunkum. There is no unlimited freedom of speech. If I defamed someone in my speech this evening, I could be sued and ruined as a result. If I incited racial or religious hatred in my speech this evening, I could be prosecuted, and rightly so. You alluded to the Holocaust. I have a different view to you. It is illegal in France and Germany to deny the Holocaust, and I believe that's correct. I believe it should be illegal to deny the Holocaust here in Britain, for reasons I have adumbrated many times. So there are already lots of restrictions on freedom of speech. And from governments like the British and the French and the Americans to talk about freedom of speech when they're bugging all of our telephones, when they're hacking all of our computers, reading all of our emails, it's simply absurd. They don't care about freedom of speech at all. It's an empty, bogus claim that they are making to assert some kind of moral superiority for the system over which they preside. I have to take just a 3-minute break for a short news bulletin. God willing, I'll still be here when you get back. You're watching Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless, taking your calls, your texts, your emails, and your tweets from all over the world. We're continuing the debate on the question that I asked at the beginning. Which of this week's terror attacks will you remember? Will you remember the communist suicide bomber who blew herself and a police officer up in Istanbul? Will you remember the ISIS terror, which continues across both Syria and Iraq? Will you remember the attacks on innocent civilians in Afghanistan? Will you remember the American drone attacks on Afghanistan? Will you remember the Israeli maiming of a teenager on the West Bank in Palestine? Or will you only remember the mass murder that took place in Paris yesterday? First, I must correct something that I said earlier. I said that a French woman had lost her baby having been attacked because she was a Muslim in France. That was true, but it did not occur today. It occurred last year, and I apologize for that mistake. Let's go to Toronto and talk to Zia. Zia, welcome to the show. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi George. I want to speak about the attack which happened on Charlie Hebdo this week.
Yeah.
I condemn this attack and my condolences to families of all those people who lost their loved ones as journalists or police officers. I agree that freedom of expression should be there and journalists should be able to publish without any pressure or fear. Like there are clauses in Islamic Sharia that a Muslim who commits blasphemy against Prophet Muhammad can be killed. However, Islamic laws only apply on Muslims. If a Muslim commits blasphemy in a Muslim country, then he can be executed. However, a non-Muslim living in a non-Muslim country cannot be judged according to Sharia laws. So that's what I think about it. And I think we need decency laws in all the countries. When internet started, people started putting all kinds of things like hate speech and child pornography. And then there were decency laws in America and in other countries. Which means that yes, you are free to express yourself, but your expression should be decent. So in France, they need decency laws. The French constitution needs to be amended, and they need to put some control to the extent of freedom of expression they have over there. And any person you love, either your prophet or your parent, if he is depicted naked on the cover of a magazine, is going to hurt you, and some kind of backlash will happen. Like, this is human psychology. So if you will hurt someone's emotions, then some kind of violent response will happen. So that's what I was thinking about it.
Okay, well, first of all, a violent response to whatever such provocation is completely unacceptable in a democratic country. We don't allow violence inside our society, and rightly. The state practices violence against many people, principally abroad, so that they imagine they're not at war here whilst making war abroad. And they now know, if they didn't before, that when you make war abroad, the blowback will hurt and harm your own society and your own people. France already has laws. When someone in France, a magazine in France, published a picture of the upper body naked of the future Queen of Britain to be the Duchess of Cambridge, I think her title is, the French law came down on it like a ton of bricks and fined the newspaper concerned or magazine concerned, and made sure that the magazines were pulped. So some things can be and are suppressed in France, but other things are not. Now, this magazine did commit many provocations against Jews, against Christians, and against Muslims. And people are entitled to protest about that, but they're not entitled to carry out acts of violence, however much their emotions have been troubled. And if they do, then they must be dealt with the full rigor of the law. That's just the way most of us in our democratic societies would like things to be. Zia in Toronto, thanks for the call. Let's go to the comment wall and take some of the tweets that have been flooding in throughout the show. Let's see what the first one is. Ahmed Omogo, the West is the founder of terrorism. I'm not surprised about all this happening. their downfall is near. And Anoyemchi says afterwards, we can all say such things as, he was not one of us, but they said it was revenge of Prophet Muhammad. Well, we're told that they said it. I have no reason to disbelieve it, though I didn't actually hear it on any of the soundtrack of the events, but I have no reason to disbelieve it. And A. Freeman says, yes, the blood of the working class is worth very little, upper echelons of our society. Well, there isn't any doubt, there's not even any debate as to whether or not the blood of some people is more worthy than the blood of others in the minds of our media and our political class. You only have to look at Gaza, for example. 2,000 innocent people were killed in Gaza. Most of them were women and children. 500 of them were children. They were murdered this summer past. There were no messages of condolences from Her Majesty the Queen for the families who lost their husbands, their wives, their children in Gaza. But there was immediately and rightly a message of condolence from Her Majesty the Queen to the families of those lost in Paris. QED, no doubt, the deaths of some are different to the deaths of others. Let's go to Ogashuwa in Nigeria. Go ahead, please. Yes, sir.
Good day, Galloway.
Good evening to you, sir. Go ahead.
How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good.
What I want to say, before I should forge ahead, I would like to tell one of your guest speakers that has spoken just now from Britain, was saying that democracy is more of no violence, they're supposed to protect. But Israel are protecting, but the Palestinians are protecting, but Israel are killing them. Okay, that one is apart. When we are talking of the issues, what has happened in France today, in fact, it is total catastrophic. It is unbelievable. But when we look other side, other way, the Western, the Europe, they are the one to be blamed. They are pushing the taxing poor people taxes to kill other viral people in the country, in other countries, in the name of democracy. But it has now, one of my uncles say, he who killed by the gun will die by the gun. We don't want this kind of thing to happen in the world. Even in Nigeria, we are not interested. But the worst part of it, how can he use a common man tax to financing fanaticals in Israel, killing Palestinians, and in Libya, in the name of democracy, in the Syria, in the name of democracy? Unfortunately, they are using to drop the weapon. So they are protecting their allies.
Well, look, there's no doubt that terrorism can be and is practiced by men with white shirts and suits and ties in government offices and chanceries around the world, and that you don't need to have a turban and a beard and be holed up in the Tora Bora to be a terrorist. But what we have to do is equally condemn all acts of terrorism, whomsoever carried them out, and however they were dressed, and however they dressed up the action that they took. Thanks for that call in Nigeria. Let's go to Australia, where Joseph awaits. Joseph, welcome.
Good evening, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, George, I just want to mention about the West's fight against terrorism and Australia's, America's, and Britain's involvement.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, I don't see a way of winning the war against terror if we don't sort our own issues here, and such as the moral decay in our society. Because I've heard you criticise the West many times, but I believe it's for the wrong reasons. Because the West, like America, is the main exporter of sexual immorality and drugs and violence on TV and Hollywood and all that. But we have the power to confront terrorism, but the problem is we lack the will in that, George. America has known for years who the world's most significant state sponsor of terrorism is, but they lack the will to deal with that country, and to hold them accountable for its terrorist acts of war. Back in 1994, the Secretary of State, Warren Christopher, called Iran the world's most significant state sponsor of terrorism. And I thought, how pathetic to make such a statement back then and to do nothing about it, you know. So just how much of a
probably
superpower
because
is
it was a
America?
big lie, Joseph, no? I mean, he probably didn't do anything about it because he knew that he was lying. And those of us who know a thing or two, those of us who know, I'm speaking now, those of us who know a thing or two knew that he was lying because we could see his lips moving. Iran is not the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. The United States, the country for whom Warren Christopher was speaking, is the world's biggest terrorist state. And the second biggest terrorist state in the world is paid for. Every single dollar is paid for by the United States. And that country is Israel. And you know that, though you're not on here to speak about it. Israel's terrorism is brazen and out there for all to see. The truth is that the war on terror, which you want more of, has actually spread terror throughout the world. Let me give you just one example. The invasion and occupation of Iraq by the United States and Britain was the reason for the recruitment into terrorism of the two suspects now being searched for in the woods outside northeast of Paris. We know that because they told us that years ago on a French television documentary. They said that they were getting involved in the jihad in Iraq against the United States and British occupation because of the pictures they had seen from Abu Ghraib and because of the massacre and destruction that was going on in Iraq at the hands of the occupation at that time. So you don't need a crystal ball. You can just read the book. You can just listen to what these very same terrorists are telling you. That they became involved, in the case of the older brother, fully 6 years ago in terrorism because of the invasion and occupation of Iraq. So my point, Joseph, is that terrorism is cascading around the world directly as a result of the actions of governments like yours, like mine, and like the United States. Now, it's acting upon a disposition towards extremism and fanaticism of some Muslims, no doubt. I'm not suggesting that Warren Christopher invented it, like he invented the quote about Iran. But by the way, Joseph, the wind has shifted. The United States no longer says those things about Iran. As a matter of fact, the United States is asking for Iran's assistance against terrorism in Iraq and getting it. Go ahead, the microphone is yours.
Yes, because we have adopted the Carter method of foreign policy and we cannot win. And
the what method?
The Carter method of foreign policy, which is all this negotiations and strategy of...
What would you prefer, Joseph? A bit more war in the world?
I just prefer we must be tough, but God has taken away the will of us to fight against these fanatics because we ourselves are sinning. You know, the West is in moral decay. If this was 50 years ago, George, we would have finished these people immediately, you know?
Finished these people? How would you have finished these people, Joseph? A bit more war? Nuclear weapons, maybe?
Well, I believe in a strategic strike against Iranian nuclear facilities. That is the... I agree with you, George.
Would a strategic strike against Iranian nuclear facilities, would that make the world a more peaceful place, Joseph, or a more dangerous place?
No, it would make the Middle East a safer place. Because a secure Israel with with our defensible borders is the...
Joseph, have they just let you out for a long weekend? Are you an inmate in some psychiatric hospital? Because that's what you're sounding like.
No, I'm just saying, George, one important thing, George, I have to say, is the outcry against the world's outcry against Israel and that, but you forgot to say there's a strategy known in Islam as al-Tatar, where if one is used as a shield and killed they're considered a martyr.
Oh, Joseph. Joseph, I'm now utterly convinced that you have sadly lost your mind, and I've certainly lost the will to allow you to continue to be on my show. Bagir is in Copenhagen. I'd rather hear from him. Go ahead, Bagir.
Good evening, George, and salam alaikum to you.
Walaikum salam.
And of course, I've condemned the attack what happened yesterday in France. These people are the enemies of Muslims and Islam. And if our position has not been bad since these ISIL Takfiri fanatics who has destroyed Syria and Iraq in 2014, then in 2015 our position is being worse here in Europe because of these crazy this Takfiri insanity.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very difficult time to be a Muslim in Europe today.
Yeah, but George, but we should also, if we should be honest, man, we should condemn all kind of Takfiri fanaticism.
I think that's vital. I think that's vital. Not to please the liberal newspapers, not to please the hypocrites in the governments of Europe, but because the Muslims themselves will be destroyed by this Takfiri fanaticism. Because once it's eaten everyone else, it will eat itself. It will eat the Muslims themselves. In Syria and in Iraq, the people who are being murdered by these Takfiris are Muslim people, overwhelmingly. In fact, in the case of Syria, they're overwhelmingly Sunni Muslims, whilst these Takfiris are never done telling us how Sunni they are. Bagir, thanks for that call. I'm going back to the Twitter now on the comment wall because we do want to encourage more Twitter traffic. Jack Tipple says 2 armed lunatics, a British tabloid, carried the headline, War on Freedom. Was Columbine a war on education? A very good point, Jack. Indeed. Amouri Rezavi says the killing of 12 French forced the entire world to stand, but no one is thinking about the thousands killed in Bahrain who just want freedom. Well, there have not been thousands killed in Bahrain, but there have been far too many people killed in Bahrain. And your point, notwithstanding that mistake, is a good one. I'm standing for the 12 French who were murdered, but I'm also standing for the others who have been murdered. Sankofa Folami says when a country sows seeds of war and destruction in another country, they are going to reap it back. Well, there's something in that. The problem, as I said at the beginning, is the people who are sowing the seeds are never the people who are hurt. The people who are hurt, like on the London Underground, 10 years ago now, coming up to the anniversary, they were not the people who had sowed the seeds of disaster in Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, actuarially, they were almost certain, overwhelmingly, to have been opposed to the sowing of those seeds. Yo is in London on the telephone. Let's hear from Yo. Go ahead.
Hi, Happy New Year to you and your staff and family, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. It's just heinous. I must begin by saying that any killing, any death at all of innocent people anywhere in this world is heinous and must be condemned by everybody, including what just happened in Paris. And I'm sure even at this moment as we are talking, people are being killed left, right, and center in all continents. But it depends on, what is important for mainstream media to focus on. I'm not discounting what is happening in Paris in any way at all. It is very heinous. And every decent person needs to condemn it, because innocent people have just been killed without any due process at all by, some lunatics, basically. But, we must look at crimes committed. After all, some people are being chased right now as we are talking for their crimes during the Holocaust. How many years ago? Yes, and it's right that it happens. But what about other crimes? Gaza, drones being dropped, dropping bombs on people, killing innocent people and all that. What is happening? Is that right? Killing other innocent people? If you want one, say, guilty person, does it mean you should kill 10 other people in addition to that? All this is wrong, basically.
Well, so it's a very powerful set of points with which I agree. Thanks for that call. The last word, though, goes to Canada, to Nova Scotia, to Halifax, and the redoubtable Gary. Gary, welcome back. Last word. Go ahead.
Good evening, George. Of course, we must all condemn these latest heinous terrorist crimes going on in Paris and the surrounding area over the Charlie Hebdo attack. But of course, the problem is the atmosphere of anarchy and violence that's been generalized by the activities of the big powers led by the United States against all those who resist injustice. And of course, the classic example was last summer in Palestine. So we're supposed to believe that the people of Gaza are the authors of their own misfortune? I don't think so. They resisted, and that is what the imperialist powers consider to be the crime. And they will go to any length to mess up the way people can see this for themselves and figure it out. And the whole media coverage of these events in Paris are proof of what I'm saying. No one's saying a word about the role of the special intelligence services that keep these terrorist gangs going. They got all kinds of people working for them. You can never trace it back to their advice and their support. But the weapons that these people used, they are very interesting weaponry. So they kind of point to these people having been certainly able to set themselves up to take advantage of the overall atmosphere of anarchy and violence, especially when it comes to the rights of Muslims as people in this world.
Gary, if we don't get off this path of confrontation quickly, it's going to consume all of us. This is a slide, just like the slide which led to the First World War 100 years ago. And it's a slide to disaster, and we're going to have to somehow get off it. You can continue the discussion on Twitter at comment_PressTV. God willing, next week.
Hello, if you just comment your name and location with that number, and just make sure your television volume's set to 0. So no 0. Can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You'll be directly put through this phone number, and then we'll call you back. Comment? Can I have your telephone number? Okay, so